Hi, welcome to this short introduction to Solo Vigilante, which is my solo rules, which I've keyed towards Vigilante City by Bloat Games. So, what you get is it claims 37 pages, but you have to ignore the cover and the uh, cre- credits and things at the beginning. So, it's just under 35 pages. So, now the introduction is quite long on this one. And when the way I work is I create a character, I start to play the game, and as issues come up, I start off with a kind of a fairly generic set of solo rules, and then I start to evolve those rules as I play. Issues that come up, I often talk about them in the introduction, and there were quite a few this time. Things I had to change and tweak and adapt. Um, so I talk about that in the introduction. Now, I had to make some changes to character creation this time. Often I don't. I used to do that a lot in the past, but then as my solo playing has evolved, it's not something I've normally had to do because of the way the rules are created for Vigilante City. It was necessary this time, and so I talk about what I had to do, what the problem was, and how I fixed it. But I also talk about creating three characters: your main player character, your sidekick, who is treated as an NPC most of the time, but you can then play as a character if maybe there's a side quest which is, or even just a scene which is better suited to their skills. So you jump into them because they're in the spotlight. Uh, you can also, if your main hero is taken out, you can play the sidekick so you can carry on playing someone to pull your fat out the fire, sort of thing. You Um, Now, the third character I talk about creating is your nemesis. You create them at the same time to complement or contrast with your hero. And as you advance your hero in level, you advance your nemesis as well, so they remain a constant threat and a challenge. So I talk about that all in this section, and your nemesis comes up again a few times in the rules. The basic question tool is really simple. It's a DC 10 skill test. Basically, if it's more likely, if it's more likely, you get advantage. If it's less likely, you get disadvantage. A 1 and a 20 are your critical results. Um, so yeah, that's really simple. You don't even need a table for that. You can kind of run that from memory. I talk about controlling NPCs. And their actions and how you can use the yesterday table for that. You can, how it relates to interrogations because hero games involve investigating crimes, investigating people, so that you're going to be questioning people at some point. And then I talk about open questions, and this is adapted from and slightly evolved from the Solo This Fantasy, which is my Survive This Fantasy rule book. So this is a slight evolution on from there. And I talk about book walking. Now, book walking is my current flavor of the month. I've been doing this a lot in my last two or three books. So what you do is you take, say, a source book or a novel or something which you really kind of write on theme or based on the setting that you're working in, and you can do stuff like if your adventures are set in New York or Chicago, you could actually use a tourist guide to Chicago as one of your source books, and it will make sure that you're hitting some of the kind of the real iconic locations in that place. Um, but what you do is you look at how many pages are in the book, or start off with how many books have you got, and you roll a dice to choose which book. Then you look at how many pages are in the book, and say the one I was using, I think had um, 287 pages. So if I was using a D20, that's about 15 pages for each one I rolled on the D20. So if I roll a D20 to choose which block of 15, and then I roll a D12, that's going to cover most of the possible pages in my book. So I can roll those two dice, find a page, and then I kind of skim read down through that page looking for keywords, cool ideas, nice quotes, and you use that to answer your questions. And So you look for the phrases or the words which are most relate to your possible situation, or the context. And so, yeah, that's book walking, and it works really well as long as you've got some kind of inspirational matter for the game. I've even used rule books which had loads of examples, and I rolled a random page and skimmed forward to the next example or piece of setting material, and uh, you look for cool stuff that way. Now, these mini tables, I think they came up in Solo This Fantasy. I used them a lot. I show you the structure and an example of it in use. Um, I like those because they help you set the tone for an area or a location, or if you're negotiating, you can kind of create a mini table of what they actually want and what's their red lines. So they're really, really adaptable, really, really easy and quick to make. I then talk about scenes and derailed scenes. Now, if you're familiar with Mythic, if you've read Mythic, my derailed scenes are a combination of Mythic altered scenes and interrupted scenes. And so, yeah, I was talking about the kind of the flow of scenes and threat levels. And the threat levels are something you can use to as a when you're creating a scene. If you know the threat levels going up, you can build that scene to include some greater danger. If the threat level is going down, you can build the scene to take the pressure off your character. So I talk about how to use that, and there's a mechanic for working with that. Um, and then I talk about recording scenes and this Cornell note structure, which I am an advocate of. So that comes up. And then I talk about something called random structure. And threat level is part of that. So if you're saying you have to create a new scene and the threat level goes up, you're going to create a scene which has more danger in it. And now, the random structure I talk about here, where you can say roll on this little d6 table, and it will give you a DC number for a skill test in that scene. So if you rolled, say you rolled 5, you've got a DC 20 skill test. Uh, Somewhere in that scene, in the back of your head, remember that there's going to be a skill test that is DC 20. Now we can take that a bit further, and it's on this next page. You can roll a d8 and say, let's say you rolled a 4, and you say, okay, so in this scene, ideally there's going to be a DC 20 dexterity skill test. And then you can do roll d10, and let's say you get a 7 or 8, and it's sleight of hand. So ideally, there's going to be a DC 20 sleight of hand skill test in this scene. If that doesn't fit you for whatever reason, um, you can kind of downgrade through that stack. So you can go, okay, sleight of hand just simply doesn't fit. Um, so can I make it a dexterity skill test? And if that doesn't fit, um, if this is a purely social interaction, dexterity isn't going to fit. So then you deep downgrade, and so the skill test for that social challenge or social conflict becomes the DC 20. So you can downgrade up or down, and you can work this both ways. You can either, when you're building the scene, say, right, I need a DC 20 sleight of hand skill test. So as I'm constructing my scene, I will insert that in there. And then it's a question of does that skill test actually come into play? Do you need to make the skill test? If you um, completely ignore the kind of stealthy element and just going all guns blazing, you are unlikely to use the skill test. Um, so just because it's there doesn't mean you have to face the challenge. If you face the challenge and fail, it means you may have to find a completely different route, different approach, or whatever. So it's another way of branching your games. Or what you can do is you can wait until a skill test comes up and then assign it the DC 20. So whatever skill test you face, you then it's DC 20, and you have to justify why is it suddenly so difficult. Now, paint the scene is something I do. Again, this is kind of once you've got all these random facts, you can then create a coherent reason for all of that, and what does it look like to your character. Now, three things works really, really well with investigative games, mysteries, and you know, the hero genre has a lot of investigating and working out what's going on. So yeah, there's quite a long explanation of that in this one. And then drama pools. I always use drama pools, so there's something which is kind of outside of me, and it puts pressure on my character. I like time pressure. So an example of that in use. And then you get the kind of adventure in three acts, which is kind of action, reaction, action, and conclusion. And then I talk about patterns with spotting patterns within your adventures to help, which help you build campaigns if you can spot the patterns. And talking about the cast of characters, quick NPCs using basically 11 for all your stats, 7 hit points, arm class 10, all your saves are 10. And then from there, if you know those basic stats, as you learn more about your the NPC, if they become a recurring character, you can evolve them from that point. Um, but you can give them skills. If you give them skills, you can increase their the stats or the attributes which deal with those skills and so on. You can just evolve them. It saves having to roll up characters constantly. And then finally, there's a few final thoughts that came up, and I put a link in here to some media stream press random tables. I found I use them as another source of ideas and inspiration within the game, which didn't have to come from me. Okay, so that's it. That's what you get. Thank you for watching.